Hi there. Good morning and welcome to Center Your Being TV. My name is MaMa Shah and I am so delighted to welcome my fellow beings into the space. So welcome in, welcome in. Please, as always, per the custom of YouTube, I encourage you to like and subscribe, though I will not be offended if you do not. I know that I am at the beginning stages of this journey on the YouTube streets, and it is what it is. So let me get right down to the point and get to the topic of the day. So the topic of the day is how to survive your family and friends while living in transition. So I came up with this particular topic of conversation on this channel. However, it is a structured workshop series that my business offers, Center of Being Bodywork and Wellness Dojo, LLC. My business is located here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I am a comprehensive health and wellness entity. And I offer life coaching, organizational development, business coaching and guidance. I offer leadership development workshop series, and I am again a licensed bodywork therapist, licensed as a massage therapist, and I have been working as a massage therapist since 2012. And you know, so that's just some of my background. I've shared before that I spent many years as a profession in the nonprofit arena, working for in the arenas of advocacy for labor, education, women, and children. And so that is the business. That is what I'm here for. And I'm so excited to welcome you today into the space and into the topic of conversation. Again, how to survive your family and friends while living in transition. Where did this come from? Well, when I was working, like I said, in the nonprofit sector as a community organizer, doing leadership development work, doing campaign work, one of the assignments of my position was to facilitate a workshop series on behalf of the nonprofit that I was working for. And so they had a series of conversations. One was around leadership development, one was around balance, how to balance work and family life, and I cannot remember the other workshop topic that I was specifically responsible for, but they were in the arena of helping working women, working families, especially working families that were living within the under the poverty line or were considered to be low-wage income earning families. That was the primary target audience. We the organization had a relationship with a couple of transitional housing shelters for women in the city. And so it was through this relationship that the organizing staff would facilitate these workshops. And so I was tasked to go speak to a community of women who were living in transition, living in shelter, and really help them with what we called sustainability skills. That's probably the best way to title it. They were sustainability skills workshops. So, you know, how to budget, how to write your resume. That was the other topic. How to write your resume and a good cover letter. How to establish a family budget. How to balance work and family. My dog is going to be tripping and I'm not about to stop the taping. So you're going to hear the dog bark and it just kind of is what it is. Hopefully he will chill out. So anyway, this was a workshop series, and I was the person responsible for going to the shelter, going to the school. Sometimes the workshops were held at schools as a part of their after-school programming for children and families. I have on occasion taught the workshop at a church. And even in some college settings. And so it was a very popular workshop series with this particular nonprofit organization. All right. So as I'm teaching this workshop series, it's particularly the topic around how to balance work and family life. And I'm working within these communities of low-wage working women, most of them living in shelter-type situations. And excuse me, as I shared yesterday, my sinuses are all just afloat, fluky. And then my dog, which is a little Westie Poo Terrier, is running around just spreading his hair everywhere, and so it's getting in my nose. So I probably will sneeze and whatnot, rub my nose, but forgive me. So anyway, I always have to stay focused because I'm watching my dog run around. All right. So I'm teaching this workshop series. I'm working with a large community of women who are living in transitional shelters, and something about the dialogues that we were having seemed very biased. Something about the dialogues we were having seemed very biased. And so what do I mean by that? I felt like it was very presumptuous for persons such as myself to, and what I mean by myself is that I was actively employed. I was earning above poverty level income, so I was not a minimum wage or low wage worker. I have had college experience, secondary experience in terms of education, and I would honestly say that my lifestyle in terms of my childhood, though there were challenges and we were certainly not rich, I went to private school, graduated from a private school in Oakland, California, attended a HBCU in Nashville, Tennessee, and so I was privileged. And I'm coming to speak with these young women about balancing work and family life. The assumption when going into the workshop, and this is what was discussed with me by my supervisors and elder leadership within the organization I was working for at the time, their premise was women ended up in shelter situations because they had some lack of ability to balance their work and family life. Like they were perhaps fired from a low income wage earning job because they had no job protected leave and had to do things like take time off to see to a sick child, or to tend to a parent that was aging, or to care for a partner or a mate who was also underemployed and perhaps underinsured. And so many working women, especially women of color, who were also single parents or who were also parents, would find themselves in the poverty trap because they had an inability to balance what was happening in their family life, which are those issues that I kind of listed: family medical emergencies, school emergencies, such as a child is in trouble and you need to get to the school and have a parent-teacher conference, health emergencies, and low-wage women who often work without specific job protections other than FMLA, which is an unpaid job protected leave provided by the by our federal government for all people to have some basic coverage over protected leave. You know, you get pregnant, you have a certain amount of time that you can take off to recover. Just in case you didn't know this, let me get real close. FMLA protected leave, especially around pregnancy and bereavement, is not enough time. Again, FMLA, though appreciated, when it comes to issues of maternity leave and bereavement, as someone who has been pregnant, had to take maternity leave, and had to experience the loss of a loved one, 2 weeks wasn't enough time. And certainly 2 weeks unpaid was not enough time for me to get myself together. So anyway, pull it on back. So the assumption was that these women were caught in the poverty trap because they had this inability to balance these family situations that came up with their work life and work requirements, right? So there's this, let me see if I can, this off balance. I'm on my phone, it's a little screen. So there was this imbalance, right? And it was presupposed by the organization, which was predominantly driven by women of no color, and women of no color who had privilege, access, and were certainly entitled, without a doubt. I love many of those women, admired many of them, and learned much from every single one of them. However, this was an entitled and privileged class of women, presupposing in what I can only say is white privilege and white saviorship, that the reason why women were existing in poverty was because they were not able to balance their work and their family life. Now, what I learned and discovered while teaching that workshop series for that particular organization was that that was an untrue statement, and absolutely unfounded, ungrounded as a reality of those women's lives. Absolutely a assumption. And you know what they say, when you assume, you make a behind out of you and a behind out of me. Exactly. The organization was behind the times in terms of that particular social construct. And so they believed, this leadership group of privileged white women, that the reason why predominantly brown-skinned women who were mothers were living within the poverty line is because they could not balance their work and their family life. And like I said, when I showed up and started teaching that workshop series, which I taught over a 3-year period, I discovered that that was not true. Those women were extremely gifted at balancing their work and family life. And in fact, I felt a little invasive and pretentious coming in there and telling them and assuming that me with my privilege could assume to tell them how to balance their work and family life. They were balancing quite well. What it was is that they were women of color, they were women, and they were women with children. Some of them had husbands. Because of the shelter policy standards, many of the fathers, in an attempt to secure their wife and their children, were living in the park across the street from the shelter, so that every morning they could get up, greet their children, and walk their children to school. So these were families that were in transition for sure. Certainly some of the women were without their mate or a partner, but these women did not lack the skill around balancing work and family. That's something I absolutely discovered. They could balance work and family. What it was is that they were women of color, and they were mothers. And this system, the systemic racism, the systemic misogyny, the systemic capitalism that devalues a human life and considers it to be capital at a place of employment, which is why I think we're all encouraged to get businesses. You have more rights as a business entity than you do as a human being, and that is just the truth. I'm gonna pull it on back though, and get back on track. So anyway, what I realized is that these women were extremely high functioning in their ability to balance work and family. These women were living in shelter, and as a part of the shelter requirement, they had to get up and go to employment. They had to leave the shelter for the day. Okay, let me get it clear. They had to leave the shelter for the day. During the day, they could be engaged in one of two activities. They could be seeking employment, well, one of three. They could be seeking employment, they could be seeking education and resources, or they could be at their job, right? Their children, the requirement was that the children, if they were of school age, they had to be in attendance at school. And I believe that this particular shelter, at least a couple of them, had some extracurricular stipend opportunities for the children to, you know, engage in after school activities. The men received no assistance and were pretty much not welcome on the premises. I think I saw one family intact at one of these transitional facilities over the, I think, about three to 4 years that I engaged with the organization I was working with, facilitating these dialogues. Okay, so those are the requirements for being in the shelter. You have to leave during the day. You cannot lay up in your bed and commiserate with other people in transition. You had to be actively pursuing and seeking employment or actively engaged in employment. Your children had to leave for the day. Now, mind you, many of these women, again, are in transition, so they have no home, they have no resources other than what they are willing to and able to carry on their back. Many of them did not have cars. Many were dependent on public transportation or ride sharing. Okay? Somehow, these women who were considered to be out of balance were able to get multiple children and themselves up, get down to a shared breakfast arena where they participated in a group family dynamic type breakfast, and then usher children off to school, whether they walked them, put them on the school bus, or had to get on public transportation and get them there themselves, or the ones that were driving would drive. So they get up in a shelter where they're sharing every single type of resource, the bathroom, the kitchen, the common areas, okay? So they get up, they get their children dressed. After they get their children dressed and ready, of course, they're attending to themselves. After they tend to themselves, they're making sure everyone eats. After they eat, they're getting out the door. After getting out the door, they're getting to work, getting their children to school, working their 8 hours or whatever they're doing during their day, because you have to come back to the shelter. If you have not gone to your job, you have to come back to the shelter with proof that you have actually been engaged in the activity of either seeking resources, going to school, seeking employment. Okay, so they have to coordinate that part of their life. As I shared with you, because it was standard policy and practice for male partners to not be invited into the shelter community, those same women would then have to figure out in a day of moving on public transportation, transporting themselves and children to work and school, typically before the hour of 8 o'clock. Okay, most children are considered late at school by 8:05. They also had to plan into their day because they wanted to keep families intact, though the system did not support them and their partner being in partnership. They would have to find time for their partner to spend time with their family. So they were doing family meal planning, etc., so that their children could have access to their biological fathers or their father role model, right? I thought that as a mother myself who was single and moving through the same exchanges, I saw them as extremely adept in balancing work and family, extremely adept. And I began to be confused and even talk to the head of the chapter of the organization that I was working with around, why do we have this curriculum? Why were we facilitating this particular curriculum? I mean, I understood the budgeting, but when you're trying to budget $10, when you're trying to budget $5 an hour, $2.13 an hour, there's not much to budget. So let's not assume that these women don't know how to manage their money. They're not earning enough. When it came down to resume writing, I got it. You know, a lot of women who have not had the privilege of the educational background that I have experienced, and many other people who are entitled in this society around access to upper and higher education, I could see where there was some need for assistance. That's a resource in that community, or at least in the community that was targeted, and in any community, perfectly honest. I know some adept professionals that cannot write a resume. And so I understood the other areas. I did not understand this topic of how to balance work and family. So I went back and forth with my supervisor at the time, and there was never really resolved. I believe the answer that I received at the time was that this was that particular organization's, and at the time, because I was involved, it was considered our. So the conversation was, this is our signature workshop series, and it's what our community partners expect us to provide in community. We have established relationships, and within those established relationships, we offer these core areas of competency and skill building. And so your job is to deliver. Not to think, not to assess, not to reevaluate, but to deliver. And we thank you for your insight, but what we need to do is make certain that this workshop series stays intact the way that it is, because it serves a particular function for our organization and for our community partners. All right, so eventually I ended up moving on from that space of employment, and I've shared in some other videos exactly how that went down. However, it stayed on my mind that so many people living in transition were being, to me, profiled as lacking structural and fundamental skills in order to navigate their adult life. And I felt like that was an assumption that needed to be addressed, and I absolutely felt like it was erroneous and like I said, extremely pretentious, extremely savior based. And I just had a problem with it, because as a woman of color who was single, who was balancing work and family myself, what I knew was there are just some pitfalls that you fall into no matter how well you're juggling. And once you fall in, that's it. You're in the crevice. You have done that thing where people say, you know, there's those gaps, and sometimes people fall into the gaps. Well, the reality that I discovered is that many women, especially women of color and women who are mothers, were falling into gaps, and nobody gave a goddamn other than to say, there's something lacking in you that is the reason why you're here. And that didn't settle right with me, because I knew from experience I was not lacking in anything other than compassion. There was a lack of compassion for me. There was a lack of compassion for the fact that I was a mother who chose to, because of certain situations, move into being a single mother. Now, the first thing that I chose was to have sex. Okay, so I chose to have sex, and I chose to have sex without a ring on my finger that let everybody else know that I was married in a traditional Western marriage. I don't value the traditional Western marriage. Know that. It's a document, and basically you are wedding yourself to the state, not your mate. It's a business agreement with the state. That's what your marriage certificate and license is, in my opinion. And I don't value the certificate of marriage highly. I value the institution of marriage with no doubt, and have supported many of my friends who have entered into the institution, whether they have done it legally in these United States in terms of signing that contract, or whether they determine their marriage terms on their own. I stand for the institution of marriage. I don't believe in that Western doctrine, though. You know me, I digress. And so, that was my challenge. I was like, this is really unfair, and this is a lot of forecasting. We are really pushing ourselves here to create a standard that we all know is unrealistic. And I have challenges around things that are not authentic, and certainly things that we present to people as feasible when they're absolutely unrealistic. I really have a challenge when we place blame without stepping back to take a look at the social constructs that created the gap in the first place, okay? Because when we talk about people falling into a gap, my question is, well, why is there a gap? You know, I mean, it's like driving down a road and there's a sinkhole, right? You don't just, you know, sinkholes just happen. But let's say this is a sinkhole that people are aware of, like, and you're driving down the road, or you become aware of it because you're driving and people are out of their cars and they're looking down. You know, what is this? It's a sinkhole, right? And you drive right through the crowd, right through the folks, and you end up in the sinkhole. People are going to, of course, blame you as somebody. Well, why'd you drive through the crowd? Didn't you see the crowd looking? What? You didn't have it? You couldn't read context clues? You drove into the ditch. It's your fault you're in the ditch. And, you know, while pulling you out, you know, you better be happy I'm pulling you out this ditch, but it's your fault you're in there. That's how society treats people. The reality is, like I said, sinkholes pop up. And as you're driving down the road and the road of life, you can get caught in a sinkhole. And the thing to do with someone who shows up on the scene considering themselves to be rescue is not to look at the victim in the sinkhole, not to look at the person who is in a place of peril in the sinkhole and say, well, it's your fault you in there. No. At some point in time, those of us who show up as the rescue authority, those of us who show up as the legal authority, those of us who show up as the EMT on the scene need to ask where did this sinkhole come from? How did this happen? How can we avoid it happening again? Is this an anomaly, something that doesn't happen? Or is this something that happens irregularly, but regularly enough where we need to have caution and awareness? It's given a name. It's a sinkhole. So obviously there's an awareness that there is a challenge. And so I think we need to start addressing, why is there a sinkhole? All right. So that's how I feel about that conversation of living in the gap or falling into the gap. Why is there a gap? Why is there a pay gap? Why do white men earn their 100% of their dollar, but as you begin to break down the ethnic representation, the ethnicity within our within our capitalistic economic structure, you have white men at the top earning their 100% of their dollar, followed by, you know, Asian men earning, you know, 88, you know, what is it, 80 to 89 or something like percent of their dollar. Then you have underneath there, I believe it's Hispanic men and black men were, at one point, black men were a little bit higher and Hispanic men were lower, but now Hispanic men are earning, I believe it's 70% of that dollar. And it goes down and down and down. When you get to women, women are earning 50% of that dollar. This is a gap. This is a gap. Why is there a gap? Then you get to women of color, and black women are typically earning 46 to 50% of the money. That's a gap. And we have to ask ourselves, why is there a gap? And so that is a challenge that, and you see I'm passionate about it, but that's the challenge that I had as an organizer and as an individual, really wanting to impact change and have a impact on our the social science of our institutions and our culture. I wanted to impact that. I want an impact, not meaning I wanted to be I wanted a reputation visibly on the scene. No, I wanted my work to make a difference in the lives of people who were living in transition. And most importantly, I was very much aware of the fact that I was one of those people living in transition constantly. I've been homeless, well, not multiple times. Yes. Yeah, I have. I've been homeless multiple times, because there's that person who is living in transition, or the housed homeless person. So the couch surfer, the extra bedroom resident, I was that person. And so I often found myself in spaces of transition while living with my children. As educated as I was, as much professional capacity as I had, as many of the resources that were available to me and that I knew how to access, I often found myself living in transition. All right. So it was a challenge for me to not address that gap, to not have the conversation, not about how to balance work and family, though that is a discussion point that I have currently and is a part of a workshop series that I now myself do teach. Revitalize, of course, with what I believed was missing from the conversation I was having with my employer. But in the space of wanting to make an impact, that's where the idea for how to survive your family and friends while living in transition, that's where it came from. Wanting to make an impactful difference, and then coming up and developing my own methodology for surviving my family and friends while in transition. And so what I realize is when we have this conversation about life-altering events, and we all experience life-altering events, a life-altering event can be something positive. It can be coming into a nest egg of money. It can be gaining new employment in a new state or a new space. It could be a promotion. Those are the positive states of change. Positive state of change can be giving birth to a new child, your family growing, as we move into the more negative, the death of a family member, the loss of a job, the loss of a business, a health impact, all of these things, and we all go through them. They require our life to transition or change, right? And oftentimes what we don't have to do is survive just the transition, the act that is happening to us or that we are engaged in. We don't have to survive just that activity. We have to survive the response and the reflection and the projection of our family and friends who are sharing life with us while we're experiencing that life transition. Because everybody got an opinion, you know. An opinion is like a Rudy Tooty. Maybe I shouldn't say that because it's not as direct. I'll say what I heard a couple of. Opinions are like noses, and everybody got one. I prefer that other part of the body. Opinions are like a-holes, and everybody got one. And typically, your opinion stinks. That's just the truth. I don't need your opinion. Most people don't need your opinion. They really don't. Unless asked for, folks really don't want your opinion. But everybody got one, and they're always willing to offer it up, right? And so that's what I experienced, is that there was really a need to figure out how to survive your family and friends while living in transition. And so I created a workshop series to discuss with people the specific methodology that I created for myself and my family to help me to survive as I was living in multiple spaces of transition throughout my life. So I just wanted to come on here today and give you a little bit of background and to the conversation of how to balance your work and how to survive your family and friends while living in transition. How to survive your family and friends while living in transition. So I thank you today for joining me here on Center Your Being TV. It's been a joy and a pleasure to speak with you today and just to introduce this topic to you. Many of these initial videos that I'm hosting at this point in time, or filming, taping, whatever you want to call it, are an introduction to the topic of conversation, a little background into my experience with the particular topic, and of course, an introduction to me as your host and your primary storyteller. And so again, my name is MaMa Shah. I am the owner and operator of Center of Being Bodywork and Wellness Dojo, LLC. You can check me out online at www.centerofbeingdojo.com. I'm also available on Facebook as Center of Being. I am available on Instagram. There are a few posts there, but I also have an Instagram, Center of Being Dojo. And I am just very excited to be in this space, to begin to have these, what I believe are necessary dialogues. I'm looking forward to the time we'll share together and the content that we'll explore as we grow this channel together. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. My name is MaMa Shah. Please like and subscribe, and have a beautiful and blessed day, my fellow beings.